see you. Hey, how are you? Great to see you. Great to see you. Hey. Great to see you. Loving your work.
Excuse me, Will. The election campaign finished in May.
Sorry.
Please. Good morning, everyone. On September the 18th, 2014, the Scottish people voted in a referendum to determine whether Scotland should become an independent country. A yes vote in the referendum would have led to the breakup of the United Kingdom and Scotland separating from England, Wales and Northern Ireland for the first time in over 300 years. As a pollster, looking for what our polls told us of the unfolding situation, this was a very exciting time. And you can see that I've dug out the TV tie that I wore on a regular basis during the campaign.
Well, it was an exciting time because I think last time the Scottish referendum happened was in 1979. I was not even born and nor was social media at that time. But more on a serious level, it was exciting because the way how the conversations were moving from offline to online and online impacting offline. I mean, it's difficult to measure, on my point of view, just from a social media analytics point of view. But yes, all challenges are exciting. So yes, it was an exciting time.
And as some of you may know, I quite genuinely was standing for Parliament in England, but in the northeast, so not very far from Scotland at all. And as a lover of the United Kingdom, I was very concerned, along with many colleagues. We wanted Scotland to remain part of the UK. But also what was very interesting was the concerns globally. So that actually this seismic moment for Britain could quite easily have had knock-on effects elsewhere in the world in terms of what other countries might do.
It was indeed a political frenzy. There weren't any riots in the streets, but the passions were running extremely high, as you can see from the chart here. And the temperature in social media was just as high. To be able to fully understand what was going on, and in keeping with TNS's contemporary approach to market research, we decided to conduct both regular opinion polling and also to do social media analysis in parallel. This allowed us as market researchers to apply our skills of interpretation and insight across a wide variety of data sources.
Okay. A lot of times when people talk about social media, they say, oh, it's all about hashtags, tweets, shares, etc., etc. And I'm quite I get quite pissed off when people say that. It's like the fact is that social media analytics is much more than that. It's actually understanding how humans converse, conversation styles, understanding, and it's like that actually varies from every social network. So Facebook is different from Twitter to Instagram and whatever. Once you understand that, then you find out what's the implicit, explicit, and contextual meaning which is carried out. Once you have that, in this case, basically what we did is like we superimposed a kind of polling structure. So the kind of indicators that you were measuring on survey, we superimposed onto social. So it's like that's how we create a kind of direct comparison between what social was saying and what survey was saying. And it's like if there's any data scientist, if at all there's in this audience, at the background we did all this fancy stuff which is like text mining, image analytics, location analytics, metadata analysis, and whatnot. Next.
We conducted monthly face-to-face opinion polls from every month from September 2013 to provide us with a robust and consistent monitor of voting trends. The key questions focused on exactly the question that was going to be asked on the referendum ballot paper: should Scotland be an independent country? And secondly, to also focus on how many people claimed that they were actually going to vote on the day. From the start of our polling campaign, the No Towards Independence campaign was very strongly in the lead. As you can see from the chart here, the lead was 19 points. But by April 2014, this had reduced to 12. But what was of most interest to us was the fact that the undecided figure continued to remain remarkably high and was almost at 1 in 3 people in the electorate at that stage. By early July, things were getting even tighter. The lead was reduced to single figures to 9 points, but we still continue to this very high figure of undecideds. People either not willing to tell us what they were going to do or genuinely undecided. And qualitative research that we were doing at the same time suggested that there was this high degree of indecision amongst the Scottish population. But then everything took off. With 2 weeks to go to the date of the referendum, we had a poll coming out which brought the two sides neck and neck, a difference of 1 percentage point. However, at that stage, the momentum was very much with the Yes campaign. They had gained 13 points in the 11 months. And even amongst those who were certain to vote, and by this stage we were recording around 80% of the Scottish population, a remarkably high figure, 1 in 5 of those certain to vote were still claiming to be undecided as to which way to cast the ballot paper.
As you can imagine, the political situation was electrified. So for the first time, probably throughout the campaign, people realised that there was a very real prospect that Scotland could go independent after 300 years in the United Kingdom. Economists were debating like crazy. Some commentators were predicting a run on the pound to below $1.50, that there could be massive flight of capital investment out of Scotland because of the uncertainty during negotiations for independence that might follow a yes vote. Meanwhile, TNS colleagues, particularly Tom, were dealing with daily inquiries from global financial companies who were desperate to get the inside story on what was going on. And needless to say, we politicians were getting very worried indeed. If the holy grail of market research is actionability, then the opinion polls certainly delivered action. Each of the 3 main party leaders decided that they had to get up to Scotland and campaign out on the street. So this was no time for business as usual. The weekly Prime Minister's questions, which some of us enjoy watching so much, where the Prime Minister is held to account, that was cancelled because they felt it was so important that they had to get up there and campaign and make the case for a no vote. And in fact, not only that, but the party leaders made a solemn vow, a solemn promise, that if Scotland voted to stay in the UK, then there would actually be more powers transferred from the UK Parliament in Westminster to the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh. Those of us who wanted Scotland to vote no had been reassured through the campaign that financial considerations, what might happen to the economy, was absolutely crucial. So we had 2 particular groups. There were more females than males who consistently were sticking with voting no to independence because perhaps they were keeping an eye on how the budget in the household was being balanced rather than getting swept away with the emotional tide. That seemed like a clear explanation. Plus, 55 plus voters as a group consistently keeping an eye on what was going to happen to their retirement funds, actually also remaining clearly in the no camp, wanting Scotland to remain part of the United Kingdom. But actually, people like me became more and more concerned because with that gap between yes and no narrowing in the polls, what was really going on, whether people really were considering all the economic issues, became a big concern. So we can see here, this is just from January and February opinion poll snapshot, that huge amount of concern about the economy, but actually in terms of how much people were worrying about the currency, which we were saying that's a really key issue. How are we going to do a central bank if Scotland is independent? Is Scotland going to have the pound or not? What currency will they have? These seemed like really fundamental issues which could have a huge impact on the economic success of Scotland in future, and yet it just didn't seem to be a critical issue for people.
Okay. While talking about social, certainly things did start up. So first we were talking in the range of like 31,000. Well, here I'm just showing you Twitter because Facebook is a bit technical to go into details. 31,000, it may move to 6 million. But okay, it's like that's not a big deal. It's like we wanted to understand what were people talking about. Next. So what we did is like, means as I was saying, we were looking at the polling indicators and also we superimposed onto social, and we found that, okay, fine, what were the issues that actually mattered to people? So it was certainly economy. Economy was the most important aspect people were talking about and worried about, and this was across the yes supporters and the no supporters. Economy, then certainly health, Europe, whether they will remain in the European Union or not, or energy. So it's like Scotland has a big petroleum reserves in their places. So yes, but it's like these were some of the issues. But next, it's like what we did is like what you saw before was just from a single point of view. We then tried to link both of them. So like we linked exactly how were different issues being perceived together. So what you're seeing here is like what we call as an interthematic map. Simply speaking, analytically, it is like a perceptional correlation map. So how are people perceptionally relating these different issues? So if you look here, economy was strongly related with taxation, which is fine, okay, making sense. But economy was not very much standing out with currency. Now you guys are intelligent guys, probably. It's like you might be wondering, okay, well, it's like currency and economy are related, but well, here basically we are looking at people who are on the footpath. So like people who are general masses, and they were not trying to relate how currency and economy were related together. So this is like a kind of lingo problem. The thing was that people were constantly saying that economy important. On the other side, the better together, the guys who wanted to remain with the UK, they were all shouting about pound. And it's like people were not making this sense up till a certain time. I think they did make some changes in the end, and Tom, you can talk about that.
Thanks, Prerit. Yeah, in the final days leading up to the referendum day on September the 18th, the No campaign, particularly in the guise of its leader, the former UK Chancellor of the Exchequer, Alistair Darling, he relentlessly argued the importance of the currency issue to the health of the Scottish economy. And only in those final days did this link between currency and the overall economic fortunes cut its way through into the minds of a lot of the people. The closest that we have to an exit poll was a poll taken overnight the day after the day of the referendum. And that clearly showed, as you'll see in this chart here, the importance of the pound sterling in the minds of no voters when it came to actually marking that cross on the paper. In the event, it was very, very clear that the issue about the pound was significantly the most decisive factor for no voters in their choice of deciding to stay in the UK.
Okay. Well, time for fancy pictures. It's like what you saw before was, okay, fine, what were people saying? Here what we are showing is like these guys, yes camp and the no camp, were also coming out with their own communications, what they were saying. So what we have mapped here is a kind of conversation map. Here we have mapped Facebook pages of Better Together and Yes, and let me explain what this is. So whenever a post or an update comes up on Facebook, this is shown by a dark blue circle. So more the engagement happens on that post, so like more like, share, comment, etc. happens, it becomes bigger. Whenever anyone on a Facebook page actually interacts with that update, he is linked by a light blue line, and those guys are showed by a red dot. Now this is a super zoomed out image. This contains almost 1,000 or million plus different conversations. Now if you just look at them, the Better Together versus the Yes Facebook page, one thing that strikes out is that the dots on Better Together are much more bigger. This means that the engagement on Better Together was much more bigger. So you might be saying, okay, wow, that's a good thing. Well, but hold on. One of the things that I have often said is like the network graphs just give a structure to the conversation. You have to go into much more higher content analysis to understand that. Now here we found that Better Together, yes, higher engagement, but most of the people were just disputing each other. So like they were just discussing and they were not in agreement with the communications put out by these guys. On the other side, the Yes guys had more of a kind of implicit button. So they had already decided that they are voting yes. So technically, Yes was actually doing better on their Facebook aspects. Next. Well, this guy, I will just say that he is in love with this guy, by the way. He is called Alex Salmond, and he can talk about it.
There's a little bit of irony for you there. So this is Alex Salmond, who was the leader of the campaign for Scottish independence. So people like me found him very annoying. But the question was, how did the Scottish people feel about him, and could he be an asset to us in saying no to independence? But actually what we were able to do was to use the kind of social media analysis that Prerit has been describing to look across social media and see, well, okay, actually, some of the people who want independence don't like the guy who's leading the campaign, but actually they have detached the issue from the man. They recognise somebody's got to carry the flag, even if they don't like him. So therefore, there was actually little that the No campaign could do to take advantage of people not liking him, because people were actually focused on the issue. And then, despite everything that we've seen, when it came to the final verdict, the No to independence side prevailed. I didn't do so well in my parliamentary election. Next time I'll get more social media analysis from Prerit to help me along the way. But what we've shown so far is what we call social optimizer, so this kind of approach to looking at social, political and other campaigns. But there's so much wider application for these kind of approaches, as you can probably imagine. Finding category insights with Social Explorer, finding segments online, literally finding people due to what they're saying on social media so that you can maximize the marketing strategy against them, even using Social Monitor to actually get brand equity scores without ever asking a survey question at all. But, more importantly, my question to you guys is, as a politician, how exactly can social media help me do better next time?
Well, Will, there is always the issue, of course, of the appeal of the individual candidate, but we better leave that one for a moment.
Fair enough. Yeah,
but to be serious again, we do see a growing role for social media going forward. And going forward might be quite interesting because there is already talk of a second Scottish independence referendum and the European referendum. As you say, we have a range of approaches now that we feel can be as equally applied in the political sphere as in the commercial sector. The one area as a pollster I would add a degree of qualification is this idea of, while social media analytics provide some fantastic diagnostics, we would argue that we're still much further off being able to give out a voting intention figure derived purely from social media analysis than some of the success that we've seen obtaining brand equity scores from the commercial sector. I would stress that the excitement for me lies in the ability to combine both data sources. It's that same better together message which eventually won the day in Scotland. We see a model similar to how we see the future of brand tracking in the commercial sector, where social media analysis gives us some early warnings and a lead measure of the way that things are moving. We then can focus much more precisely on the key questions in the actual survey, which allows us to fully explore the data. As a resident social media guru or geek, whichever word you want to use, Prerit, what do you feel about it?
Okay, well, every technique has its own positives and negatives, and rather than just comparing this versus this, it's better to use both of them for a holistic understanding. For certain things where social is quite good is time cruciality. For things like, say, PR disaster, or certain things like, say, TV debates, social can give you, well, using the kind of content strong analytics I was talking about, it can give you a kind of qualitative depth, but on a quantified level. Otherwise, you are talking with like the call groups and surveys, which is like 10 days, and 10 days is too far off in today's world. Second, historic comparison. Because social networks, it's a back data, you can still go back in time, which is not possible with survey. A lot of hypotheses you can actually check back in time. Just to give an example, after he lost his elections, he came up and said to me, "Oh, Prerit, it's like, could you actually have seen this kind of aspect when the referendum was going on?" I said, yes, I could have seen that, but what I will do is like, I will just mine back the data and find it out for you. That is not possible using survey. Third, with the European referendum and probably a Scottish referendum again lined up, we have a good understanding of the historical analysis that we did. And with new things coming up, we are more in a position to not only give insights, but also shape outcomes.
Yeah. What we'll do in questions is also address the question of how the UK compares to less well-developed democracies in terms of the role of social media, and offer you a couple of reflections on that. But it's fair to say that with the second Scottish referendum possible, and with a European Union referendum, more British referendums, which, apologies, might have impacts on other countries and the rest of the world, there is no question whatsoever that there's a huge role both for survey and for social, and that much like the verdict reached by the Scottish people, they are indeed better together. Thanks very much.